As with all seminars I teach, I must first and always begin with thanking the three primary teachers who are responsible for all the knowledge I have learned in China. They are, in the order of meeting and studying with them, the late Professor Wong Jin-Huai, the late Dr. Xie Chi, and 89-year-old Dr. Li Hongxiao. The influence of these men on me, and now you, is impossible to quantify, but fully represents the desire within the Chinese arts to ensure they survive to the next generation. You know, while Chinese practitioners are famed for their secrecy and withholding of knowledge, the truth is those with deep knowledge are much more concerned with the loss of this knowledge than they are with keeping it secret. They may not want to waste time teaching people their knowledge that it's either wasted on or will be misused by, but they do really want to teach it. They're sort of desperately waiting to pounce on someone, to just give all the knowledge to as much as possible, as quickly as possible. All of the old practitioners who really are solid like that are like that. No one was ever secret with me, though there were no shortage of other students around me who were ignored. Secrecy to protect a livelihood, feel superior to others, or to hide one's own inferiority should not be confused with not wanting to teach people you don't want to spend time with, you don't trust, you don't like. And when you are an old famous practitioner anywhere in the world, there's a lot of people who are hovering about you that you probably don't like. But that doesn't mean you're secret with the people you do or the people who are really trying to learn. For this portion of our time together, I must point out that of the three gentlemen I just mentioned, it is the late Professor Wong who was my guide into the Tao Te Ching. A classic scholar, a calligrapher, a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and dedicated to explaining Lao Tzu in a time when doing so could end you up in jail. He was pushing Lao Tzu before the Cultural Revolution. Of course, he was quiet in the Cultural Revolution. The moment it was over, he was teaching it again or finding ways to work it into his classes. So the depth of his love for this very pillar of Chineseness, which is really the essence of the Tao Te Ching, cannot be plumbed except by having spent time with him. We spent wonderful mornings and afternoons reading the Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi, and the Huainanzi, which is another great book that hopefully you guys will ask me to do as well. Sometimes with tea in his tiny little living room, sometimes in a walk looking at trees in the sky. I mean, think about it. To be 19 from the West on a quest to learn the Chinese arts, and this being your first real experience, this person who's just sort of walking you through the great Tao of things and taking you for walks and drinking tea, and wow, I mean, it was my first real experience in that father-son relationship of mentor-student, and it was magic. How lucky it was. It was in a really dark, scary time in communist China in 1986, 87, 88. But the magic of this person, this bubble we were in when we were doing this was incredible. If you want to catch a bit of Professor Wong's magic, do watch Bill Moyer's Mystery of Qi episode in his Healing in the Mind series. It was released in 1993. It's on PBS in the United States. He in the episode of Mystery of Qi, he's the calligrapher and flute player who's featured within the teacher of David Eisenberg, who is the guide for Bill Moyers in China. When I first began bringing traditional practitioners to the West for lectures and seminars, the first person I brought was Professor Wong. Now today, it is the ATS mandate to film absolutely everything we do, whatever it is. That's why all these cameras are staring at me. And the reason is that one of the seminars that we taught on that first tour was an introduction to the Tao Te Ching. Professor Wong would be sitting here, I'd be sitting right next to him, and he'd be talking and I'd be translating. That today, we are unable to watch Professor Wong directly talk to you through the video of the time, talking about the Tao through story, calligraphy brush, because he'd put up calligraphy paper and go crazy on the walls, and the joy within him that was so contagious. because I didn't understand just how transient those magical times would be, is a crime. And, you know, literally shame on me. I wish I had known or thought, but I was young. And I always believed in those years that we would do these seminars, things would happen, and then when I reached the age I am now, 46, and he was in his 80s, that we would live, I would find some property in the mountains with a view of more mountains, lots of space, and we would spend my middle years and his last years translating every book we want. Laozi, Zhuangzi, Huainanzi, Neijing, Nanjing, Shanhanlun, Jing-Huai, Sun Simiao, just going through them, him as the great classic scholar, me translating it. I had this beautiful vision of what was to be that is not. So, while we don't have any video of Professor Wong talking about the Tao Te Ching, he did leave us a book. Self-published, stapled, because nobody would publish it at the time. It was eventually published as a manual for foreign students learning Chinese culture, which, if you're familiar with China in the 80s, was the ultimate insult to a teacher. How can you insult a teacher of anything Chinese? You go teach foreigners. Well, the people who were in charge in those days didn't realize that it was the ones who met the foreigners who got invited to go overseas, and suddenly everybody wanted to teach the foreigners, and now everybody wants to learn to speak English and teach foreigners because you get to travel. But in the 80s, that was the ultimate insult, which Wong took in stride, and it took him to a great many places all over the world. So he left us this book, and in deference to him and his influence on me, it will be the primary Laozi commentary you work with in this first reading of the Tao Te Ching. I did bring some wonderful samples over there of what I use on my desk, both calligraphy Tao Te Ching and Tao Te Ching with notes and references over there. At the break, you're welcome to take a look. As I said, I really do have to stress the word primary, as there is something you do need to know about the Tao Te Ching. While the Tao Te Ching may seem obscure or mysterious to us as Westerners, there's only one other book in the entire history of the human race that has sparked more editions, commentaries, arguments, the entire pantheon of books ever written and published. Only the Christian Bible has generated more writings throughout its history. And both are still being actively commented on, debated over, and translated, despite the incredible number of years that have passed since their writing, and the number of editions already published. Our time together today, and in this seminar, in the seminars that follow, is a testament that in this day and age, 2013, new editions of translations and commentaries are being created, now in video as well as in print. Why is the Tao Te Ching so important? I cannot answer that except to say that there's something I call little truths and big truths. The greater the truth of something, the longer it remains true. The smaller the truth of something is, the shorter it remains true. If we come up with something we or someone else takes to be true, we want to ask ourselves, yes, it's true, but for how long? How long is this truth going to be true? It was true that white men in the United States believed women should not have the right to vote and that it was their right to own slaves as common property. They truly believed these things and argued vociferously to keep it so in their day and age. Today, this truth of theirs is shocking to contemplate. It's true that we are completely reliant and addicted to fossil fuel. But that was not true before, and will no longer be true at some point in hopefully the not-so-distant future. Even the hallowed truth that the sun will rise without fail every day tomorrow on will end up untrue when this part of the solar system ceases to exist, but the universe continues on. The Tao Te Ching has remained relevant because it is talking about a very big truth. A truth that remains true despite changes in nations, religions, cultures, time periods, even cataclysmic upheavals. Thus, for those who discover the feeling of this big of a truth within them, it becomes very important to them. It guides their existence and choices, just as others believe this truth that they are spouting is folly. Now that's chapter 41 of the Tao Te Ching, which reads, or which ends, 不孝, 不足以为道. If people aren't laughing at you, what you're saying isn't worth being called the Tao. So when we touch upon a big truth, a truth that is much bigger than bell-bottom jeans being the most attractive thing to wear in the 1970s, or, I mean, maybe this is lost over here, but in the United States, having a Farrah Fawcett for their haircut, it's what every girl wanted, or people believing it was worth paying hundreds of dollars for a Cabbage Patch doll. I mean, that was really important to a lot of people to own a Cabbage Patch doll. And then it wasn't at all. So when you start seeing that these truths that people are reacting to are short, and you see how short or small they are, we see everything around us more clearly. The greater the size of the truth, the more clear and broad our clarity becomes. Be it in the vanities and jealousies that guide the people around us, or the patterns of the seasons, or the nature of nature, we see it clearly. We understand the whys of things, are less distracted by transient things, which is such an important thing. A gift of the Tao Te Ching is just that we're much less distracted by small truths. The babbling brook that's within us, crashing up against our organs like white water on rocks as the 7 emotions splash through our system, is slowly replaced by a deep lake of calm. If you think about it, every roil of emotion, of thought, it's like the water just going through and whoop into your liver, and the liver gets all agitated, and thunk into the spleen, and the spleen gets soaked, and then whoop into the kidneys, and the kidneys go wah. And it's just, I mean, it's smacking through our bodies and just hitting all your organs. Of course it affects us. Of course it's so loud and our organs are so busy saying, oh, gotta hold on, that there isn't time to just see something else. And the calmer we are, suddenly the more apparent things that have been there all the time become to us. So grasping the longer lasting truths suddenly throws the momentariness of the truths guiding our fellow humans into stark relief. And it's important to know it is a dangerous business grasping the bigger truths. If you don't grasp the importance of chapter 2 right out of the gate, and that's why it is the second chapter in the book, right after telling you that there's no way to completely get to the big truth anyways. So we can't even get to the big truth. And then whack, they hit you with the second chapter to say, hey, don't take things too seriously. Don't think you're right. It becomes harder and harder for us to exist in current society if we take this truth that we've realized too seriously, for lack of a better word. And I mean current society, not now, but whatever time somebody wakes up to the Tao Te Ching. Whether you live now, or 100 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, whether you were in the Warring States period, or in the Han, or the Ming, or the Qing, or in Greece, or in Germany, or wherever you were, when that moment of, oh, it makes it very hard for you to live in society. And more importantly, society can end up having a very low tolerance for you. So beware. And try to remember to follow the Tao when you hear it. But laugh at yourself for feeling you should, instead of just being. So, the Tao Te Ching is about hitting our mind with a certain way of thought. A truth, as recognized by Lao Tzu. He's recognizing things. He's not making things up. He's recognizing things. So this truth has to hit our mind, and then we have to see whether it makes sense to us. Do we hear it? Do we go, oh? Do we say, or do we laugh at it? If so, if we can hear it, and it does affect us, how deeply? And most importantly, since all of us realize that there is something important to it, what could we do to help our mind be better affected or afflicted by the Tao? The answer to this is self-cultivation. Cultivating the habit of being in places where it is easier to be affected by the Tao, like in nature, like in a garden, a room with a view, and cultivating the axis, our internal axis of our essences, qi and spirit, or our Jing, qi, and shen. So with those clean and our body more spatial, there's more room for it to resonate in. Resonation is a poor word, but it's a working term we're going to use for the moment. Now, chapter 41 is also going to tell us that literally the Tao is so loud it makes no noise. I personally think it better to put as, we are so small, we hear not its noise. I mean, think about it. I looked this up for this seminar. Our planet is rotating at 1,675 kilometers an hour. To give you an idea of what that means, we are rotating at 465 meters a second. Right? Fastest human in the world, 9 point some seconds, 100 meters. Earth, 465 meters, 1 second. It itself is moving at great velocity around the sun, which is moving at a great velocity around an infinite number of things that are all hurtling through space. Right? Yet, we hear nothing on a still night. How is it possible that there's so much movement, and yet we hear nothing of it? I mean, really? It doesn't make noise to go through that? I mean, a car whizzes by you. You'll hear the wind. I mean, think about it. It's just, everything is moving so fast at such speeds, and yet you say, oh, what a calm, still night tonight. Let us return to self-cultivation and resonation. Now, as our working term, I'm going to assume the Tao must have some sort of hum. Acknowledging that if I was ever to recognize that hum, it would not be the hum of the Tao. Chapter 1, Tao Ka Tao, Fei Chan Tao, the Tao. If you know the Tao is not the Tao. The name, if you know the name, is not its name. Okay? Knowing that I'm completely wrong and calling it a hum, I'm going to call it a hum. So, I assume there's a hum, like the thrum of a perfect tuning fork. Which is why, when you think about it, we are so drawn to meditation bells, those gongs and bowls with that beautiful long sound. Those of you who had seminars before me and heard me go on a rant about intention, I had the best intention to find and bring a beautiful Wong to indicate what I'm about to say. And intention does not mean you did anything. We are all reflections of the Tao. Thus, we are also tuning forks with a hum or a thrum. By the time we can become aware of the effect of society, lifestyle, and the emotions on us, the tuning fork that we are is so covered with rust or barnacles that when it's struck, instead of going thrum, it goes ah. That's us. Ah. And every time we get whacked by something of the Tao, ah. Right? What is the path of internal cultivation? It is the path of Taoyin, which is why this is paired together today. And it is the path of removing the barnacles, sanding off the rust, smoothing our resonance so that with each day when we strike the bell or gong within ourselves, it rings a little clearer, a bit longer, a bit more in harmony with the harmonic of the Tao. So we start to go, Wong, and it's going, Wong. And you're like, and it gets more and more fun, right? And when we turn that corner, when we are more in harmony than out of harmony, there's a line, right, where we cross. It is what feels good. And anything that shortens or dulls our sound no longer feels good. Suddenly, instead of having to figure out what makes our sound better, we become acutely aware of all the things that are making our sound worse. This is when you start having trouble living in society, so be careful here. It's a dangerous step when you start saying, oh, that's ruining my hum. And this means, look at this, spending time with people or doing things that are barnacle or rust producing becomes harder and harder, leading us to retreating further and further away from being a part of the great symphony of harmonious music going on around us. Words like hermit, retreat, these are all sort of balmy words that we hear and think, wouldn't it be nice if I could just, But it does give us a gift as well when we start to be aware of when things are out of harmony. We suddenly find ourselves having immediate kindred spirit with people who are also in more harmony with the Tao than without. We don't like to spend time with things that are out of harmony, but we are more and more drawn to things that are in harmony. The cleaner our tuning fork becomes, the more we find ourselves recognizing other clean tuning forks. From different cultures, walks of life, languages, in the strangest of places, at chance meetings, right down the street, wherever it may be. Which brings us to an important point before we go into the foundational Taoing practices to set us up for the foundation chapters of the Tao Te Ching. Practicing what we call internal cultivation, doing Taoing practices to clean our barnacles off, is not the only and exclusive path to the Tao. There is no path to the Tao. There is no only one way that works. There's no way that works and no way that doesn't work. It is equally present and open to discovery in anyone and everyone, whether they've heard of Lao Tzu or not. What makes this worthwhile, the path of Dalian, and the Chinese arts so appealing, is that they recognized something was going on 700 BCE. That's a long time ago. And they gave it a working name, the Tao, knowing that it was an inaccurate name, and then they tried to figure out what would help them experience it more and more fully. The on-purpose exploration instead of accidental discovery is what makes the Chinese arts so appealing to me. Thus, the appeal of a good Taoing practice is that it is not special, it is not magical, nor does it guarantee anything, but it is at least a well-worn, well-trod path in which we are following the footsteps of people who certainly ended up with some really clean tuning forks compared to us by seeing the writings they left. You go, wow, that's a heck of a tuning fork. For that person to have popped out those words. All right? And so these people left us some pretty enlightening works to spark our own awakening on this path that people are trying to follow. Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, Huainanzi, Confucius, Mencius, Lu Bing. People not drawn to this often think it seems to be a lonely path when you are just so trying to find this thing that makes you apart from everything else. But it's actually packed with really good company if we but know they existed, and hear their words through voice, book, whatever it may be, from whatever time period they were in, leaving it for us. There is some great company on this path if you just know where to look. Now, this room that is mostly filled with Chinese medicine practitioners, I want to briefly address this wonderful reality we have here. Everybody here is already very familiar with all of this. In the description to this seminar, I talked about we have a responsibility to build our clinical skills through daily practice, but that the great leaps, practice shifting leaps, come through gaining a greater clarity of the Tao. We've all felt this. It has already happened to all of us at some point or another. But as clinical practitioners with patients to treat, that does not stop us from asking, wouldn't it be better to start on page 1 of the Neijing, grasping the depths of the medicine while meditating, engaging in Taoyin practices and treating patients, and then taking that maturity of Taoyin, patience, and Neijing to the Tao Te Ching? Fair enough. Which brings us to why we are here today reading the Tao Te Ching instead of the Neijing or the Nanjing. Both of these books, which it is important to point out, is really one book and then a book of questions and answers that arose when putting that first book into clinical practice. The Nanjing, that Jing is referring to the Neijing. So it's difficulties from the Neijing. Yeah. So when you look at those books, some of what they're saying is so rich in meaning that they're hard to fathom all the way to the bottom of the words. Thus, great scholars have been annotating them, explaining the meaning of the phrases and the concepts from the earliest times through the Han, this big bubble in the Tang Dynasty when they really went to a great effort to annotate, to make explanations of every phrase, of everything in these books. I brought it last time, you know, when you open up the Neijing and you see the traditional, the way it's written this way, but you have the large characters, and then underneath it you see 2 rows of smaller characters. And that's all annotations, comments from the commentator on original text in Chinese. And so all the way through the end of Imperial China in 1911. So a book such as the Neijing, which would be pretty short comparatively if printed by itself, suddenly becomes this huge number of volumes. I have the Neijing written in that style with no commentaries, and it's 1 book. And then I have the Neijing with commentaries, and it's 6 books. So I mean, you can see 1 to 6, that's a whole lot of people making comments as opposed to original text. So, because of these commentaries and all of these things, what we then have to realize is that in China, the habit is, I don't say, this means this. I pull out a word or a character or a phrase, and then I give you certain references, because everybody's writing references. So instead of giving you a definition of, it means this, it will say, Confucius says, blah, 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 blah. In the something something, there's this phrase, which enlightens you to the meaning of it. And so, the most common in the Neijing is Lao Tzu. If we were to start with the Neijing, we would end up reading all these commentaries that are quoting Lao Tzu without ever having read Lao Tzu directly. So we'd start with the Neijing, we'd read the Neijing, and then I'd read you the guy's comments who said, Lao Tzu says something, 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 Lao Tzu says something, 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 but none of us here would have read Lao Tzu, which is why we're here. Now, how common, am I selling this to you? I mean, how common is Lao Tzu as an explanation tool to the Neijing? Page 1. We did this in one of the seminars here, didn't we do? Last one, Xi Zai Huang Li, Sheng Er Shen Li. In ancient times, when the Yellow Emperor was born and already able to talk and blah, 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 went through this whole thing. And then Nai Wan Yu Tian Shi Yue, and then asks the heavens teacher his question, Qi Bo answers, and then the Qi Bo has his answer about people, they're Fa Yu Dao, right? They've got the method of the Dao, Zhi Dao, right? And then the commentary, Lao Tzu, blah, 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 blah. We didn't even get off page 1 of the Neijing, and they're already quoting Lao Tzu. And it's like that all the way through the book and through all the books. Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu, which is why we're here with Lao Tzu. So, whether we're here, you're not a Chinese medicine practitioner, and we're here to gain a greater harmony with nature, a better tuning fork, or whatever it may be, or to gain greater clinical skill in treating our patients, or both, we are starting in the right place. It's so rare for me to be allowed to start in the right place. I'm just so busy. It's just, I've been waiting to do this for a long time.